Welcome to Talking with Tatchell. First of all, the West invaded Iraq, then it occupied Iraq, and now the West wants to grab a share of Iraq's fabulous oil wealth. Leading the resistance are the Iraqi trade unions, in particular the oil unions. They say that oil is a national asset which should be used for the benefit of the Iraqi people. With me to discuss the battle for control of Iraq's oil are Ewa Jasiewicz, who is from Hands Off Iraqi Oil, and Muayad Ahmad, who is a co-founder of the Federation of Workers' Councils and Unions in Iraq. Welcome to you both.
Thanks.
I wonder, Muayad, if you could perhaps begin by giving us a sense of how much oil wealth Iraq has.
I mean, it's quite clear that the reserve of oil, Iraq is considered the third largest reserve of oil in the whole world. And it's estimated that 115 billion barrels of oil is there already discovered, that there's the reserve is there. And are talking about between 100 to 200 billion barrels which will be discovered in the future, but it's not now confirmed. That's the situation. So, I mean, Iraq is on a sea or an ocean of oil, in fact.
So it's of huge economic and strategic importance.
Exactly. That's why one of the main reasons behind all the war in Iraq and this bloody conflict inside Iraq is about that. One of the major issues.
I mean, we are talking about, or scientists are talking about, an end game in terms of discovery of oil and in terms of global consumption. We are moving towards peak oil, discovery and production. And so therefore these reserves become ever more important as more and more other older fields in other countries are being diminished and finally used up.
Exactly, and one of the important things in that regard is the oil in Iraq. The production of oil is easy. It's not so very cost effective. The oil is there, and it doesn't need a lot of investment to have oil produced. And that's one other important thing in this regard. So, the big powers in the world, they will try to control this big reserve of oil in Iraq, and they are all already doing that. Mm-hmm. And so it will be continuing in the future as well.
Ewa, could you give us a sense of how much of the global oil reserves are in Iraq? Roughly.
Estimated proven reserves 10%, but the estimate is that it could be twice that. And as Saudi Arabia's reserves are in decline, likewise a lot of reserves in Iran have already been found. Iraq has a lot of untapped wealth. There are over 100 exploration blocks up for grabs. There's 40 in the Kurdish region and 65 in the rest of Iraq. And what the Ministry of Oil has said is that these will be opened to foreign investment. And the disturbing thing is that the Iraqi constitution and the Iraqi oil law both legislate for free market principles, for free market policies to have international investment in the oil industry on the terms of international investors, big oil companies. The law itself was demanded by the International Monetary Fund. The IMF demanded that Iraq opens up its oil industry to international foreign investment. Likewise, the oil law, which hasn't been passed, was one of Bush's benchmarks, his top benchmark. And throughout the whole process of actually drafting this oil law, even though it was 3 Iraqis who actually completed the first draft, the British government, the American government, and 9 multinational oil companies all had access to drafts of the law and were commenting on it and influencing it. And really, I think it's testament to the fact that people are so opposed to the mandate of this law, which is to open up Iraqi oil to to foreign companies in a move that would overturn legislation of the past, of the 1960s, that nationalised Iraq's oil reserves, and see it handed over to the control of foreign companies. When I say control, I mean the production, the depletion, the rate of extraction, the sale. This will be up for grabs for foreign companies. Even though Iraq will get massive profits, it doesn't actually need these contracts that are being proposed, production sharing agreements.
I mean, can you give us a sense, Muayad, what kind of profits, what kind of percentage of the profits might the Western companies take?
That's huge. I mean, according to this oil law, 46% of the production will be in the. I mean, they own the 40% of the production of the oil.
Who owns it?
I mean, those companies, the foreign companies, international companies.
They will take almost half of the ownership.
Yeah, exactly. And the government formally owns the wells of the oil. The state is the owner of the oil, not like before. But before, I mean, previously, in the 50s and 40s and those period of time where Iraq under occupation, I mean, the state only taking tax from the companies. But nowadays, I mean, according to this law, that the government and the state formally owns the oil fields. But in fact, the production and the export of the oil will be in the hands of those companies. So the huge profits and the huge revenue will go to their pockets. The most important thing in this whole scenario, I mean, let me make that clear in the beginning. The people of Iraq during the last 30 or 40 years, they never benefited from the revenues of the oil, actually. I mean, under the in the hands of those foreign companies, as well as in the hands of the Ba'athist regime or the dictatorship. So, I mean, the issue is about how this time, how can the benefits of this reserve and the production of oil be returned to the people and not to the pockets of the foreign companies or the pockets of the militia-type government.
So what you're really saying is, in the past, the Iraqi people have never really benefited. This is a great opportunity, the first real opportunity for the Iraqi people to have real ownership and control and benefit from these reserves.
Exactly, but if that needs a lot of, raising awareness about this issue. I mean, this oil is there for decades, and the people of Iraq getting poorer and poorer, and they've been deprived from the benefits of this oil. So this is the time to, I mean, the people of Iraq, after all those sufferings, should have their say about their wealth.
Ewa, which Western companies are vying for access and control? Because really, what you've identified, Muayad, is that there's a split between ownership and control. Under the oil law, the Iraqi government and people will retain the ownership, but the real effective control is going to be in foreign hands. So which Western companies are vying for the control, which really, in essence, is the most important thing? Ownership is irrelevant. If you've got the control,
yeah, exactly.
that's the key thing.
All of the majors, Shell, BP, Total, Chevron, Exxon, Eni. I mean, they 6 of them, pretty much all the ones that I've just mentioned, they employed the services of an organisation called the International Tax and Investment Center based in Washington, which is a corporate lobbying organisation that advances corporate economic interests in countries that have undergone shock therapy or undergone economic collapse or a war. They did a lot of work around Russia. And the ITIC produced a lobbying document which was all about the contractual options for Iraq. And the contractual option that it said was the only option for Iraqi oil development was the production sharing agreement, which is what oil companies want because it gives them the most control. There are other contracts that they could sign. You know, Iraq, it's an established fact that Iraq does need, the industry needs revamping, it does need a lot of investment, it needs technology, the people who work in the industry, they want training. But this can all be provided by foreign companies. But under a service contract, a technical service contract, which is the kind of contract that Saudi Arabia has, similar contracts in Iran, Kuwait, because they allow the state to retain sovereignty over the way that the oil is developed, and also allows the state to economically diversify, because if 95% of all government revenue is coming from oil, which is the case in Iraq, then effectively Iraq's economic development will be mortgaged to the oil industry, and other forms of development, agriculture, different forms of production, won't necessarily be given the attention that they could have if Iraq could control its own economic development.
So what we're really saying is that this new oil law is a departure from previous practice in other oil-producing countries where they've retained both ownership and control over production. Yes, foreign investment, yes, franchises to some extent, but very much the state has maintained control in all the other countries, but Iraq now is departing from that principle.
Yeah, in the top 6 OPEC countries, you don't see production sharing agreements.
Muayad, could you give us a sense of what the unions, and indeed the Iraqi people as a whole, would like to see instead of this law, or how would they like to see the law modified? What kind of agreement would they like to see?
I mean, actually, before I go to answer the question, I think only 12 oil fields in the world which has got a very poor productivity have that sort of sharing production, that sort of agreement that's been given in this oil law. So it's only for those fields that are very, very poor. But the oil fields in Iraq are very productive, and that's another thing in the benefits of those companies. Anyway,
so you're saying that if the oil was very difficult to extract, very low grade and so on, then there may be a case for this kind of law with greater profits for Western companies. But in the case of Iraq, that's not true.
Yeah, exactly.
It's easy to get the oil out. It's high-grade oil. Therefore, there's no justification.
Exactly. And we have got, acquired from years and years a very good staff of, working in the field in Iraq, in oil fields. So, even this investment they are talking about, that it needs technology, I know that, but high standard technology. But there are huge number of people who have been trained over years to produce oil in Iraq, and we can run our business actually. But they want to put that as something that is very difficult to extract oil in Iraq or things like that. Anyway, go back to your question. Regarding the trade unions, the labor movement as a whole, if I take it, and the people as well, as I said before, the whole situation, the whole political situation is something, the government and the state and the whole system is not part of the people. People are suffering because of the whole scenario that it is going on for years. And oil is one of the issues. Oil is the main, as she said, the main resources of the people of Iraq, and 90% of the production or the wealth of Iraq is from oil. So that's
it's oil that funds the whole social economic development of the country. So
it's vital for the peoples. And the trade unions and the progressive parties are trying to stop this oil law, and to open up an opportunity for the people to have their say about the oil and how to be distributed and things like that. They are talking about the sort of equal distribution of the revenue over the regions. But that's according to this law, only a percentage, a small percentage of that revenue will be distributed. The major bulk of it will be taken by the companies, by the foreign companies. So the people, for the first time, and the trade unions want to stop, first of all, this law not to be implemented and not to go through the parliament, and secondly, to have an open discussion about what would be the say of the people regarding this matter. It's a very vital and important matter. That's the issue.
Eva, can you give us a sense of how that that resistance is progressing because the law hasn't yet been passed. There have been attempts to pass it, but the resistance from the trade unions and the wider general public has made it not possible. Do you want to explain a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I mean, well, the resistance has happened at many different levels. At a cabinet level, the planning minister threatened to resign if the law was passed. Also, at a religious level, the Association of Muslim Scholars, a Sunni organisation, has issued a fatwa against the law. Also, within Parliament, there are various political blocs, and the Sadarists and the Tawafuk, the Front for Reconciliation in Iraq, and also some of the Sunni politicians as well have expressed their opposition to the extent that it wouldn't really be possible to bring the law to Parliament because it would get defeated because there's still so much opposition. And with the trade unions, all the trade union federations in Iraq, and there's 5, as I understand it, unless some of them have merged, there's 5, are opposed to the law, and in December came together, signed a joint agreement saying that production share agreements, contracts that hand over sovereignty of the Iraqi state, the oil resources, to foreign companies, is a red line and it won't be crossed. And people, trade union leaders, union members have threatened to take industrial action if the law is passed. Particularly the Iraqi Federation of Oil Unions, they've been very strong on this. They've been holding conferences every year where they've invited experts and academics and activists from all over the country to come and discuss how this oil law is going to be changed, because there should be an investment law, but obviously there has to be a referendum, this has to be a public process, and this is what the unions are saying. And on a public level, a recent poll that was commissioned by human rights organisations in both the UK and the US found that 63% of Iraqis surveyed throughout all the governorates in the country wanted state-owned companies to develop the Iraqi oil sector. They didn't want foreign companies by a ratio of 2 to 1 to develop their oil sector, and 32% of them felt very strongly about this. And in terms of Iraqi people being informed about the oil law, only 4% of respondents felt that they had totally adequate knowledge about the law, and I think it was 76% that said that they had inadequate information about the law. So there hasn't been enough of this discussion. It's all happened behind closed doors.
Can I just move the conversation on a bit about the threats that have been put out against the Iraqi trade union leaders? There's been quite a few threats to arrest them because of their resistance, because of the threat of strikes. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Muayad?
Yeah, I mean, those threats were always there during the last 4.5 years. I mean, regarding this, the last one I think was a strike regarding in the oil fields and the oil factories, and the government wanted to dismantle the organization, the workers' organization. That was one of the threats, and threatened to arrest Hassan Juma, I think, the head of the oil
union.
Yeah, oil union in the south. Anyway, and there is also one thing. I mean, in the rank and file, among the workers in the field, in the oil industry, actually in Iraq. I mean, rank and file movement against the law and against the I mean, for wage pay rise and for better condition of work on other things. I mean, there's a movement inside the workers' movement inside the oil industry in Iraq. That's a fact, and it should be pushed forward to get somewhere. And the government knows about the dangers of this, and knows about the dangers of a united sort of move by the workers in different sections, and this has been done over the last 2-3 years. I mean, exactly. So I mean, the government is going to do the threats and arrested some of them, and said that still in some government-owned companies, they don't let the trade unions to function, to work, because
they're not recognised.
Yeah,
not allowed.
No, they don't. They are not recognized, and they say that the old law from the Ba'athist regime in 85 or 87,
the Saddam regime,
Saddam's regime, yeah, 87, that deprived the workers to have in the state-owned companies to have their own unions because they are employee, not workers, under that title. So you're saying that the current government is using the old Saddam-era laws to repress and non-recognise unions. Yeah, exactly, that's the case. That's the case.
I think overall we'd say that the unions today have more freedom than they had under Saddam, but it's still not real freedom.
Exactly. I mean, in one sense, I mean, the people have got their own initiative, the working class people. Even during this period, this bloody period of time, this we call it black scenario or dark scenario that's going on in Iraq, killing and civil war, the sectarian war. Even during this time, I mean, the workers didn't stop to organize protests and demand for the better condition of work, for pay rise, for unified sort of work. So this has been going on all the time in Iraq, and the government and even the international companies know about this. I mean, if the workers are get united, it will be a huge factor in the
it'll shift the balance of political power,
yeah,
and change the direction
exactly,
in which Iraq is currently going.
Exactly.
Can I ask you, what's your view about what might happen if the Shia fundamentalist parties get control of Iraq or, say, the southern region? Because we know historically they've been very, very anti-union.
That is a disaster. As a disaster would be for the working class people, because we have got experience in Iran, and as how they dismantled all the free trade unions in Iran, and how they try to make them, some of them, agents of the government. I mean, there will be despotic rules, and it will be very bad for the working class people. And even now, whenever they find, I mean, the workers, they cannot express their own views, even in the workplace when they gather.
Can you tell us, I mean, obviously, as you rightly point out, the Shia fundamentalist parties and militias, like Muqtada al-Sadr and the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq, they're all very influenced by Iran. Their politics and Shia religion comes very much out of that fundamentalist Iranian tradition. Many of the Skiri people, the Supreme Council people, were based in Iran for many years. You're right to point out that after the Iranian Revolution, there was an absolute bloodbath, not just the mere banning of trade unions or dismantling of them, but the mass slaughter of trade unions.
Exactly.
Do you think that's a real possibility in Iraq?
A real possibility. The only factor that can make that not happening is the united, I mean the working class to be united and be powerful, not to let them to get power. And the progressive forces in Iraq should be, I mean, empowered. That's the only way to get them not to repeat the same thing as happened in Iran.
Ewa, can you give us a sense of what the trade union agenda is in terms of, the broader future of Iraq? I mean, it's very much focused on social justice issues, on the redistribution of wealth and power. Do you want to give us a little bit of sense of?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of organisations. Muayad's organisation put together a draft ideal labour law for welfare provisions and equality at work, and I think that's been really well received by other trade unions in Iraq as well. The idea is to have a really, I suppose, a genuine, direct, participatory democracy that respects everybody's opinions and religious affiliations without sectarianism. The idea, certainly with the Iraqi Federation of Oil Unions, is that they don't belong to any political party. They don't represent the views of any political party. They've grown and they've gathered so much strength at their base because they've steered away from all that, and that's enabled them to carry out the work of a trade union. Politically speaking, beyond what I've already said, I couldn't imagine you know, the IFOU turning into a political party or forming a sort of political party agenda. But the idea is, yes, to get rid of the occupation immediately, full withdrawal, immediate withdrawal of all troops, and for Iraq to be a united country. You could have the Kurdish region, but for no regional breakdown of the country, you know, the Supreme Iraqi Islamic Council, as they call themselves now, they want to create a 9-region, 9-governorate super region. They've stated this before, and it would be completely disastrous. I know that the IFOU has had death threats from certain religious parties.
The IFO is the oil union.
Yeah, they've had death threats because of their stance against regionalism and the breakup of the country. They want it to remain united, and for the oil industry to be centralised, and for workers to have as much of a say and a participation in the running of their industries from top to bottom. That there shouldn't be this hierarchical structure based on sort of archaic structures, you know, skill-based structures, that's okay, but that everybody has a hand and a say in how...
I mean, one of the things that really struck me is the way in which the trade unions in Iraq have been a real unifying factor to bridge the sectarian divide. You know, people of, you know, Shia and Sunni, you know, Kurds and Arabs, you know, everybody is working together around a common agenda for the common good. And that's really quite unique in Iraq, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the working class people was the backbone of making the society going on, not dismantled altogether. I mean, because the impact and the actions of all those militia forces from the Sunnis, Shias, everyone. I mean, they were trying to destroy the whole society. Bloodbath they were doing, and I mean, one of the major factors who led not the society to be destroyed was the working class people. There are so many interesting examples. I mean, in some areas which were very hot, very conflicted area. I mean, like Kadhimiya, for example, or other areas which have been populated by Shia, named Shia people. I mean, the workers were trying to help those Sunni people, Sunni workers who were afraid to come to work, and they do their work instead of getting their salaries paid, their wages paid. So they were cooperation in so many areas.
Well, I guess that this whole issue of cooperation and working together to defend the Iraqi national interest and to control Iraq's oil supplies ought to be, or could be, a real unifying factor which might help heal the wounds of the conflict and get people working together for a better Iraq for everyone. Let's hope so anyway. Thank you both for joining me, and let's hope that there is international solidarity to support the Iraqi people in their struggle to maintain their control over their resources. Thank you both, and thanks to all of you for watching this edition of Talking with Tatchell. Please join me again next week.